For the Sharks to take the next step in their rebuild, they need to improve their defense. We look at how.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at The Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We're the number one sports podcast network where we cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be looking at some ways to start to improve the defense over the next year as the Sharks look to, again, try to take that next step in the rebuild. So we're going to be looking at internal candidates that can help improve the defense over the next year, potential free agents and trade candidates, and why this might be a harder than expected exercise for San Jose. So before we start to dig into all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So as the San Jose Sharks, right, we're kind of, in this building phase of the Sharks and, our fun, frisky phase. And we have good nights like the nights against against Utah. Then we have bad nights like we had against the Caps. But a listener, a longtime listener I know, Alex, sent me a message and said, JD, how do we improve this defense over the next year? And I was like, this is a great question. So, Alex, we're going to figure out how to improve this defense, right? And especially because you look at the Sharks defense, right now they have two players who are under contract for next season that are currently on the roster. And that would be Dmitry Orlov, who has of course, a no trade clause this year. And then that goes into a 15-team trade list next year. And then you have Sam Dickinson, who is, of course, in year one of his ELC. And we're going to assume both these guys are going to be here next year. So you have, therefore, 4 other spots you have to fill just to, put out 6 plus, some depth and backup, et cetera, et cetera. So the Sharks will have to be very, very active in trying to revamp this blue line, right? And with the Sharks, looking at how they built this is very much so far a patchwork group where you have guys that, a lot of free agents or trades that you have made to try to fill holes. You look at, basically the only guys who were drafted and developed by San Jose, Mario Ferraro, who was, the 2017 draft for him. And then you have, 2017 draft second round pick. You have Sam Dickinson, who was drafted and developed here. Yes, Luca we'll give him the developed part of it, as he was drafted by the Devils and part of the Timo Meier trade and has been developed, but still not a lot of homegrown talent here. So the Sharks are going to have to try to kind of continue to patchwork this thing up. And there's, of course, 3 main ways to acquire talent. You can draft and develop, which the Sharks have been doing, especially in the forward group. You can sign free agents. And then you can, of course, trade for players. Those are your main ways to acquire talent. I would also put, the free agents or trades, would, if you want to claim waivers, it's kind of a trade for future considerations type of thing. But anyway, Nicoletti, I'm looking at you. So for San Jose, they're assuming they don't re-sign anybody and trade some of these players off, and I'll assume Luca gets re-signed as an RFA. You're still going to have a lot of spots to fill in. Looking at players who are in the Sharks system that are going to be potential guys that you can, count on next year, and be like, this is a guy I think who can be not only on the opening night's roster for the 2026-2027 season, but players that we can count on for the full season, right? And really the only guy on the Barracuda right now that you feel like you can pencil in, have an opportunity to pencil in for next year is Matthias Havled. Oh, not Matthias Havled, sorry, Luca Cagnoni, my bad. Luca Cagnoni, right, who's had a great season last year in the AHL, is off to a really good start this year, and feels like kind of the next guy who's going to be ready to graduate from, among the defense from the Sharks, from the Barracuda to the Sharks. So there's him. And then, of course, you have Eric Pohlkamp, who was actually just named the NCAA Defender of the Month this year, for November. He is probably going to sign his ELC and be, in the mix next year. But again, you don't know how he is going to respond, right? Is he going to need, like we've seen with Cam Lund and like we saw with Colin Graff, is he going to need some time in the AHL to kind of get up to speed and to kind of finish off, that polishing school before he becomes a full-time, NHL player? Maybe not. But I think it's hard to say definitively that Eric Pohlkamp can come in and claim that you can 100% count on Pohlkamp being in the NHL next year. Again, that's it's hard to just kind of pencil him in, right? And especially because we don't know how he makes the jump from, college to professional. I believe in Pohlkamp, but I don't think it would be a wise decision just to kind of pencil him in for a spot with no backup plan. And then looking at the draft, right, because that's the other part of the draft and development, where the Sharks are kind of currently heading, their current trajectory, even if they pick a defenseman, with the whatever pick they get in the first round here, it's hard to even imagine that player coming in and having an impact, right? And maybe they do. Maybe, you get a Matthew Schaefer type of thing. But more likely than not, whatever you draft this year, whether, assuming, right, they're kind of in that early teens, 10 through 14 range or whatever. If they continue to stick there, you're going to get a guy like Daxon Rudolph or somebody like that, where there probably needs some more time. So it's hard to really bank on that, right? Like having a young guy coming in and winning a job, straight out of the draft. It could happen, right? It could 100% happen. But again, it's not one of those things where I think you can just kind of pencil it in and say, okay, I think, Rudolph is going to play next year. For example, I think Pohlkamp is going to be in there, and I think Cagnoni is going to be in the lineup. That's a lot of ifs, I think, there. So we can really, out of all these guys who are kind of in the system and ready to start making an impact, I think Luca Cagnoni is the safest of them, and he'll probably get a nice taste of NHL action at some point here during the season. But among these other guys, I don't think any of them are quite ready, or I'm not willing to bank on them coming in and 100% stealing the job. So could they? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not. So the Sharks are going to have to look elsewhere to continue to add quality pieces to this defense, which I think needs an injection of quality pieces. So what does the free agency market look like next year? And spoiler, it's not looking great for San Jose if they want to try to add a quality defensive piece. So we're going to look at some of the names in free agency that are potentially available, and a list that's going to continually dry up as players continue to re-sign. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1944. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You can pull up the app. The layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and have your seats locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. And the prices are included free fees up front, which is the best thing about Game Time. There's no last-second surprises at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets. When every match, concert, or event with Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. All right, before we continue to look at the defensive free agents here, and it's not great, guys. It is not great. Do want to, of course, thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't yet, perfect time to subscribe, as of course we'll, continue to work through this rebuild and what the Sharks' next step should be. We'll have reactions to the Sharks games, of course, and of course Barracuda coverage and Sharks prospect coverage as well. So make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts, and of course you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. So the other, right, you can draft and develop, you can sign free agents. The unfortunate thing is the free agency pool for defenders is not great next year. Looking at players who, kind of like, again, with the Sharks having a lot of money, right? As I'm pulling on Cap Friendly right now, the Sharks are projected to have not Cap Friendly, RIP, Puckpedia, sorry. The Sharks are currently projected to have $54 million in cap space, right? And they're probably going to have to spend probably about 25 to 30 million just to hit the cap floor again. So, and yes, like Eklund's contract will kick in, and Colin Graff will need a new contract, and Mook Madulin will need a new contract. Like, of course, the Sharks will have to re-sign some of their own guys next year, but nobody where you're like breaking the bank. And even those contracts, the Celebrini Smith contracts, those won't even kick in until the 27-28 season when the cap continues to go up. So, the Sharks will definitely need to, spend some money. But the defense here, I don't know if there's really much that you look at and you're like, let's throw a ton of money at that guy. And the problem is, right, when you have such a spare pool, it's going to drive the prices up because teams get desperate. So looking at kind of players, just the biggest cap hits that are coming off books. So you have John Carlson, who's 35, is going to be coming off an 8-year deal at $8 million. You have Jacob Trouba, who's coming off a 7-year deal at $8 million with the Ducks. Ben Sherratt, who's coming off a $4.75 million with the Red Wings. You have like Rasmus Andersson, who's 29. Maybe you could potentially talk me into that one, and he's probably going to get traded this year to somewhere, and maybe he gets traded and they sign him to an extension, which is definitely a possibility. You have Connor Murphy, you have Nick Jensen, you have Radko Gudas, you have Matt Dumba, Nicoletti, which we're doing right now. You have Mario Ferraro, who's probably going to get traded at this trade deadline. Carson Soucy, like, none of these names are like really kind of, at least when it comes to like guys who are coming off big contracts and probably expected to sign big contracts again. None of these guys, I think, are really kind of floating the boat, right? If you look at players who like at least come right now with point, like kind of the free agent point leaders, if that makes sense. John Carlson, of course, we just talked about. And like even with Carlson, I just assume he's probably going back, like probably just going to sign 1-year deals with the Caps until he's ready to retire. It would be my guess, right? Especially because he's still like such an impactful player for them. But you have a guy like Darren Radish, who's an undrafted guy who's kind of worked his way through the AHL. He's having a really nice season with the Lightning. He's got 16 points in 20 games. You have Sam Malinsky, who's got like 13 points in 26 games for so far this season for the Avs, and maybe they try to re-sign him. You have a guy like Nick Blankenberg, who's got like 11 points in 16 games for Nashville. Like Shea Ryan, who's got 10 points in 25 games. Like, it gets really dry really quickly here. So, well, the Sharks may want to go to free agency and look to sign one of these guys. Is there anybody here that you like hear their name and you're like, I'm ready to commit to this guy for a long time, or ready to throw a ton of money at this guy because we need some help on the blue line? And I think that's the problem, right? And especially with the way with the salary cap escalating as quickly as it is. And we saw it last year right before free agency, right? We spent a bunch of time looking at potential free agents for the Sharks last off season, right? Looking at all the big names, maybe the Sharks should sign this guy, sign that guy, whatever. How many of them just decided, I'd rather not move my stuff and just stay home? And I think teams are quickly realizing that while the cap is growing so quickly, the contracts really aren't keeping up with the growth of the cap. And I think they're realizing it's easier and more less expensive for me to just re-sign a guy than to go out there and compete in free agency for players, because with the scarcity, it's driving up the prices of the players. And especially this, looking at this potential crop, Rasmus Andersson's probably the belle of the ball in this year's free agency. At least last year, there was other guys you could potentially, like Aaron Ekblad, you could put okay, that's a first overall pick. You could at least kind of talk yourself into that. I mean, no offense to Rasmus Andersson, who's having a bounce back season and, looks to kind of recapture his game this year. And of course, is a guy who, I think wants out or doesn't want out, or who knows with Rasmus Andersson, this is a second round pick guy who's really developed into a fine player. But Rasmus Andersson's your best player potentially. Are you willing to sign Rasmus Andersson to a 7-year deal at $8-9 million? Maybe, because that's, if he gets to free agency, that's going to be the deal right now, because there's nobody else. So while the Sharks may want to go out and try to find a long-term piece and find some players to help with the defense, because again, you're potentially losing, how many players on defense, right? If you don't re-sign, assuming they don't re-sign Leddy, assuming they don't re-sign Klingberg, assuming Ferraro gets traded, and if Liljegren's potentially gets traded, and they have Desharnais, even if you re-sign one of the between Desharnais and Liljegren, you still need those are 6th or 7th defensemen, maybe a 4th defenseman, and a guy like Liljegren. You still need some other top end pieces, but there's just not a lot out there, I think, that really kind of warrants these big contracts that they're potentially going to get. So that leaves trading for people. So who are some players that the Sharks could potentially trade for between now and next off season? So we're going to look at that and why I think Quinn Hughes kind of holds everything up when it comes to the defensive trade market. So we'll break that down here in just 1 second. The holidays are amazing, but they can also get overwhelming fast. Travel, gifts, parties, year-end expenses. It's really easy to lose track of your money this time of year. That's exactly why Monarch has become such a game changer. If you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch. Rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025, Monarch is an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, simple dashboard. It's your own personal Puckpedia. The holidays spending category can be a lifesaver. You can see exactly what's left in your gift and travel budget in real time. In minutes, you can check your worth, link all your accounts, keep track of your contributions before deadlines. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. All right. Do, of course, want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right. So we looked at homegrown talent. We looked at free agents. It's not great. How about trade candidates? And I think this is where the Sharks are most likely going to have to kind of swim in, pun intended, if they want to try to get something done, right? Because we don't want, I think, right, we don't want to find just some guy who's going to be here for like a year and then you're back here the following year trying to figure something out. Like, as the Sharks are building, you want to start to kind of get some more of these long-term pieces, right? And I think this is where, again, like I think this is where the Sharks are probably going to have to go because, right, you have the number one prospect pool. You've got plenty of picks. Like you have all the ammo in the world to do stuff, right? So if Mike Grier wants to get aggressive in the trade market, he can. Now, am I saying like every trade, every potential free agent or trade player, like trade candidate, you should go grab? No. And like that's going to be the part for Grier is trying to find out like what pieces do I need to part with to try to acquire a guy. So, everybody's going to have their price. But looking at, about a week ago, Daily Faceoff kind of released their first, maybe it's about 2 weeks ago at this point, their first kind of names to watch on the trade risks. And some of these guys we talked about, like Rasmus Andersson, who's the obvious candidate, right? He's 29, etc. You have guys like Braden Shen, who's 34. Like, no thanks. Like that, we Justin Falk, too old. We don't want guys like that, right? You have a guy like Brandon Carlo who's signed for 2 years, and maybe for him it could just be a change of scenery type of where he just has not played well with Toronto, and maybe Toronto, who I know Toronto's won 3 in a row now. Maybe they're kind of pulling themselves out of it. They've got Pavel Mintyukov from the Ducks, right? Young first round, 10th overall pick in the 22 draft. Like that could be a potential target. Like this guy who's already played 150 games in the NHL. The problem, right, of course, is why would the Ducks trade him to the Sharks in your own division? And then you have to see Mintyukov for the rest of his career. Right. I mean, if anybody look at what the Ducks did with Vegas, and that worked out really poorly for the Ducks. So maybe like a guy like Mintyukov, like that would be the prime type of player. But again, why would the Ducks trade Mintyukov to the Sharks? Doesn't make a lot of sense for them, especially like unless they wanted, a more veteran, I can help you now type of player. But I don't know if the Sharks have anything that they want right now. Emil Andre with the Flyers, solid, numbers, kind of, analytical numbers, but for some reason just kind of fallen out of favor with the Flyers. He's 23 and is on a cost controlled contract, so this could be one of those like buy low, get him over here and see what he does type of players for San Jose. You look at some of the other potential defensemen, like nobody, Rasmus Ristolainen, who's old / hurt. And maybe you let him kind of come in here and hope that this could be one of those projects where you have him come in, play for a little bit, and then maybe you flip him type of scenarios. But again, I think for the Sharks, you should be more in the building stage instead of trying to kind of flip players. Of course, the big name, right, is Quinn Hughes, and 100% the Sharks should be in on the Quinn Hughes if Quinn Hughes is potentially available. But Hughes is going to have a lot of leverage, right? And he's going to be able to kind of pick where he wants to go. And if he wants to go to the Devils, or, I've heard, I think the Red Wings are now the hot team with potentially behind them. But like the Sharks have the assets, right? Like it would cost a lot, picks, prospects, etc. It would cost a lot to acquire a guy like Quinn Hughes, but Quinn Hughes is a game-changing talent. Would take this Sharks defensive unit and really transform it, and just this Sharks team, and really kind of kick it into that next gear. But again, I think Hughes is going to have a lot of leverage in where he wants to go. And does he want to go from a team like the Canucks, who are whatever, to a team like the Sharks, who are, again, on the rise? But I think for a guy like Hughes, he probably wants to be in a much more kind of win now or getting ready to win scenario than the Sharks. So maybe a guy like Quinn Hughes. You could also, especially if Quinn Hughes does go to the Devils, maybe you can get some of the potential spare pieces from the Devils, because the Devils have a as we've talked about a bunch of times with the Devils, they have a lot of guys on their blue line, right? And I don't think you're not getting Simone Nemec. I think that time is over, or he would be going back to the Canucks. You're not getting Luke Hughes, of course, but maybe a guy like Dougie Hamilton, who does have a 10-team trade clause, is a little bit older at 32, but and does have some injury history, of course, but is a very, very effective player, and is signed for the next 2 years after this one, where he can come in and be your top defensive, especially offensive defenseman, right? And if you're looking like the Devils, where you're going to have to pay Quinn Hughes a ton of money, for them getting $9 million off their books would make a ton of sense, and the Sharks can easily absorb that contract. And then, again, Hamilton would have a lot of leverage in this, and just kind of see where he would want to go. But you could potentially, you get to be the guy here. Look how fun our team is, et cetera, et cetera. So you could potentially do something like that. And I think for the Devils, that kind of clears the way to have Quinn Hughes come in, be your number one defenseman. You have Luke Hughes, you have Simone Nemec, you have your, your kind of three main defensemen there, and then you have plenty of kind of more defensive defensemen to partner and pair with those guys. So maybe there's something like that. Or you look at Buffalo, right? And kind of the same thing with Buffalo, where they have a lot of money on their blue line. Of course, you have Rasmus Dahlin, who they're not going to Rasmus Dahlin's not going anywhere, of course. But you would wonder if maybe a guy like Owen Power, right? Former first overall pick, is 23. He has no trade protections until the 28-29 season. He's on year 2 of a massive, year 2 of 7 of a massive contract here at $8.3 million. And hasn't really lived up to the status as a number 1 overall pick with the Sabres. Maybe you kick the tires on that, right? And you go with the Buffalo rule of, once guys leave the Sabres, they tend to have better careers, right? Because you can make a whole team of just former Sabres guys who are having great careers after they left the Sabres. And you wonder if maybe for a guy like Power, who does, there are some questions with this game, et cetera, but just maybe getting out of Buffalo and getting to a new place might be the best thing for him. Or maybe, again, Bowen Byram, who this team kind of kicked the can down the road by signing him to a 2-year contract at $6.25 million. Maybe you inquire about one of those guys if you're Mike Grier, and just say what would it take, and are you guys looking to move this? And I know the Sabres have kind of gotten back on track here a little bit, but the Atlantic is also To be honest, like, it's a really bad division that they've been able to kind of climb back into the race a little bit here. But those, and like, I think those are a couple guys that you could look at where they would easily fit the Sharks timeline as two players who are, 23, 24, and would provide, I think, a little bit of juice on this blue line as the Sharks try to kind of turn this thing over and revamp it. So it's not going to be easy. Like, I'm kind of doing this exercise. This isn't going to be an easy overnight fix for San Jose to try to kind of build up this blue line. Because again, you have a guy like Luca Cagnoni, who I think is ready to play in the NHL, at least should be by next year. But a lot of the other guys are still a little bit away, right? You look at the free agency class, is not a great free agency class defensively, and some of these guys are having good career or good years with their current teams, but again, with the way the cap is going, it's more and more likely that they're just going to get re-signed by their team, so they don't have to compete with this free agency group. So trade market's probably where Mike Grier is going to have to get things done if he wants to try to improve this defense sooner rather than later. So we'll see, guys. We'll see what Grier's got up his sleeve. Grier likes to trade. It's been a little while since he's made a trade. I'm sure he's itching to get back in there here soon. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tonight or Friday night for the Sharks Stars game. Of course, we'll have a preview for it as well on YouTube only. So make sure you guys are following along, of course, on YouTube. You can follow along wherever you get podcasts as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Until tomorrow. Bye, friends.